Well, that's the largest ovation I've gotten in a long time. I may try that again. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bill Mooney, and I'm president of the Westchester County Association. On behalf of our board, our staff, and our members, I'm delighted to welcome you to hear from our esteemed Governor, Andrew Cuomo. We have assembled a great crowd this morning. Westchester's most influential power brokers are in the audience, and we greatly appreciate everyone taking the time to be here. I certainly want to acknowledge some of the special guests who have joined us today. We have a number of elected officials. Please hold your applause to the end if you don't mind. From Westchester's great cities, we have Mayor Noam Branson of New Rochelle, Mayor Tom Roach of White Plains, Mayor Mike Spano of Yonkers, Mayor Frank Catalino of Peekskill. From our towns, we have Supervisor Paul Feiner, town of Greenburgh, Supervisor Chris Burdick, town of Bedford, and Supervisor Andy Stewart, town of Orangetown. From Westchester County Government, County Clerk Tim Idoni. From our state government, we have New York State Senator Andrea Stewart Cousins, New York State Assemblyman Dave Buchwald, New York Assemblywoman Sandy Gatoff, and New York State Assemblyman Steve Otis, and New York State Assemblywoman Amy Paulin. If I missed any elected officials, I apologize. It's okay to applaud now. You should all know, by the way, that this is not the first time I am introducing a governor named Cuomo, as I had the distinct pleasure of introducing Governor Mario Cuomo a number of years ago. And by the way, I forgot to mention somebody, and I apologize. I would also like to acknowledge Len Scheifler, the chairman of the Mid-Hudson Regional Economic Council and the CEO of Regeneron. Len? And another issue with Len, the fastest growing biotech company in the world, located right here in Westchester County. Okay. Lastly, I would like to acknowledge the Board of Westchester County Association, chaired by Bill Harrington. I don't know if Bill's here this morning, and Chairman of Blakely, Platt, and Schmidt. I would like to also ask our Board of members to stand and be recognized. All right, now it says go back to your script. Okay. All right. As I said, I had the distinct pleasure many years ago to introduce Governor Mario Cuomo during my Chase days at Crane's Breakfast in New York City a number of years ago. I know you wouldn't know that by looking at me. I'm not that old, but anyway. We have a history, by the way, of working with the current Governor Cuomo during his previous tenure as Attorney General of New York State, where we collaborated to accomplish significant health care reforms in the health care industry. We look forward to hearing about the governor's plan, so much of which is in lockstep with our own initiatives: economic development, property tax reform, and growing an entrepreneurial ecosystem, all vitally important to the governor and the hallmarks of Westchester County's Association initiatives. Our Health Tech Conference next month will showcase tremendous innovation taking place in Westchester's healthcare, biotech, and medtech space, an economic engine right here in this region of $15 billion. And we extend an invitation to the governor to attend that as well. You know, you push yourself away from the table a little bit. It's hard to believe it's been more than 3 years since Andrew Cuomo was sworn in as governor of New York. In just that short time, he has not only proven he has what it takes to get things done, but also that he can work with both sides of the aisle to make it happen. Collaboration is fundamental to moving this state forward. And this governor really gets that. Let me tell you, the collaboration has been absolutely sensational. Now, when I first read this, when I first heard this, I was aghast at these numbers. I want you to pay attention to this if you're not paying attention. By turning a $10 billion deficit into a $2 billion surplus, passing the first middle-class tax rates in 61 years, enacting the first property tax cap in New York, funding statewide universal pre-K, Governor Cuomo has turned the page on the dysfunction that has plagued our state for decades, by the way. When you think about it, we were the laughingstock of the nation. Now we have leadership, and we have great leadership. It's okay to do it again. Working with the legislators, this year, Governor Cuomo produced a fourth on-time, balanced budget that controls spending, creates jobs, and proves that New York is really open for business once again. He forged public-private partnerships and overhauled the state's approach to economic development. The governor has eliminated many, many obstacles that used to drive business away from the state, working towards eliminating high taxes and onerous regulations, including the elimination of the rollback of the MTA mobility tax for more than 46,700 businesses right here in the Hudson Valley. And when you go back a couple of years ago, that was a real big deal for all of us, that's for sure. Smart investments in our business community, tax cuts, and the fact that this is the fourth year in a row that the governor has held state spending at or below 2%. A feat, by the way, that has never been accomplished. Never been accomplished. All of this has reversed New York's reputation as the tax capital of the nation, bringing more jobs, investments, and innovation to the Empire State. This is by far, the most friendly state government in recent history. Never before has the business community in New York had a more proactive and dedicated partner in Albany. The governor has made his number one priority job creation, and he knew he couldn't do it without the support of the private sector. As a result, here's another magnificent number. New York has led the nation in creating more private sector jobs since the recession. Incredible when you think about it. All of these accomplishments have been made possible because the governor has transformed New York into a model of functioning, effective government. Once again, going back to collaboration. One that works with the private sector and not against it. This fourth on-time budget continues the governor's idea of entrepreneurial government and builds on the progress of the state that is made over the last few years by cutting property taxes, by far the most burdensome tax in the state, especially here in Westchester County, where we've had to pay the highest property taxes in the nation for far too long. Governor Cuomo's leadership has produced real results for the people of our state, and that progress has brought pride back to Albany and restored New York's faith in government, proving that when New Yorkers come together as New Yorkers and put New Yorkers first, the sky is the limit. We can accomplish anything with collaboration and working together. Ladies and gentlemen, I now ask you to join me in welcoming the man who has done so much to turn around the state of New York, to bring back independent leadership, and most of all, to get government working for the people in business. The governor of the great state of New York, Andrew Cuomo.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. Good morning to all of you. Boy, that was some introduction. I should just say thank you and leave, I think. Couldn't get any better than that. First, to Bill Mooney and the Westchester County Association. Bill is Mr. Westchester. He represents the best of what Westchester's all about. His career, a great private sector success, but also giving back, also involved in the community and his civic obligations. He's really a model for all of us. Let's give him a round of applause. Bill Mooney. Bill did work with my father and me, Governor number 52 and number 56. I was tempted to ask Bill who was his favorite governor, but I was afraid I knew. Number of guests who are here today. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to come out on short notice. We wanted to talk to you about the state budget because it's a major economic and policy happening. But to my colleagues from the state legislature and local government, let's give them a round of applause. Pleasure to be with you again. My secretary, what they call secretary, chief of staff, the person who runs the whole operation, is a person who Westchester knows very well, Westchester resident, a lot of experience, Larry Schwartz, who's here with us today. Len Schleifer, who is here, who is the co-chair of the Regional Economic Development Council, which is a device that you'll hear more about in a moment. But it is the economic development organization that we work with in the region. Len Schleifer is co-chair. He's Regeneron, which is a phenomenon in biotech. Also interesting about Len, he's won all sorts of awards, CEO of the universe, I think. Regeneron was invested in by the state of New York under Mario Cuomo. At that time, they would actually take an equity investment in a company. When they were trying to keep a company in New York, they'd take an equity stake. The only mistake Mario Cuomo made was he sold the stock too soon. It could have retired the entire state debt if we had held on to the Regeneron stock. Len Schleifer, pleasure to be with you. We want to talk to you about the state budget. The state budget, the word is deceptive in this context. Budget sounds like a planning device. It's actually much more than that. A state budget basically answers the question, who are you going to tax, how much, and where are you going to spend the money, down to the finest detail. The budget's a way you see whether or not a government is actually going to work or not, right? Washington gridlock happens when they go to do the budget. Why? Because the budget is where the money is, right? It's Willie Sutton. Why do you rob banks? That's why the budget is important. The government can function and go on, and they'll discuss policy and politics all day long. But when it comes to spending the money, that's when you see whether the government actually works or not. And the budget really is the blueprint for what that state, what that government is going to do. And it's probably the single most important act that a government undertakes during the course of the year, and it tells the full story. We call this budget the Grand Slam budget. You'll see why in a second. But as Bill said in the introduction, there's an old saying, before you decide, you don't know where you're going until you know where you've been. You should look back first. And when you look back just a few years ago, the state of New York was in a perilous condition. There was scandals, there were indictments, there was basic dysfunction. The state government was literally a laughing stock on late night TV. They would make fun of it. And it was a shame because the New York state government had been the foremost government in the country for many, many decades. And there was a pervasive sense that New York was losing it, that the best days were behind us, that businesses were leaving, that people was leaving, that New York had lost its energy, lost its edge, that New York had lost its mojo. And a lot of it was our own doing. The perception was worse than the reality, but the perception was based in part on a reality. And it was our own doing. Over many years, we had become a state of high taxes. We had an anti-business culture, an anti-business mentality. Government was the enemy of business. We took business for granted. And it caught up to us. It really caught up to us. Famous saying, New York State has no future as the tax capital of the nation. You know who said that? Me. But that sums it all up. You know, the taxes kept going up, up, and up. New York became one of the highest tax states, if not the high tax state. And people are smart, and businesses are smart, and they're more mobile than ever before. And they will leave. You know, it's hard to accept as a New Yorker, but they don't have to be here. There are other states in the country. If you look at a map, you'll see. There are other configurations called states, and they can move to one of these other places. It's not like living in New York, but there is a tipping point. And you keep raising those taxes higher and higher and higher, and at one point they will leave. Plus, with the mobility and the technology, you can travel easier, weekends are longer. Residence is now determined by 6 months of the year, so people can get creative with their calendars. And I really believe we were on the precipice of losing the New York that we knew and we loved. The question is, why were the taxes so high? Because we spend a lot of money. That's why the taxes are so high. We had literally a spending addiction. And this is the story of the state of New York. This is, for the past 50 years, the state of New York actually spent more money than the people of the state were making. I mean, it is that unbelievable. I have 3 teenage daughters that I'm struggling through in life. And One of them, we're working on the lessons of basic lessons of economics. And the basic lesson is you can't spend more money than you make. There is a system, and the inflow must equal the outflow, right? It's a continuum. That's the basic lesson of economics, unless you're the state of New York. And that's what this chart says. We literally were spending government money at a higher rate than people were earning it. And not just 1 year or 2 years, but literally for 50 years. 6.2% income growth over that period, 6.8% government growth, and 4.1% was inflation. So the rate of spending was out of control. Well, it's politics. It's not politics. Over those 50 years, you had every political configuration imaginable. You had Republican governors, you had Democratic governors, you had Republican senates, Democratic senates, every kind of political configuration you could imagine, and the spending went on and on and on, and it continued. Why? Because more than the political influence in Albany, it was about the special interests. Because it's about the money more than it's about the politics. And the state budget, $137 billion, $140 billion, and growing. It's a lot of money. And those interests that were involved in those commercial interests were very instrumental in the budget and manipulating the budget, more than the politics of the budget. So job one when we walked in 3 years ago was what? You had to get spending under control. As hard as that was, you had to get spending under control. It was everything or nothing. And we did. And this is the rate of spending over the past 3 years compared to past administrations. We spent 1.2% per year. The Pataki administration was 5.2%. Cuomo, Bill's favorite Cuomo, was 6.9% over his 12 years. Nelson Rockefeller, 11%. He was a great avid builder, built a lot of the SUNY system, built the World Trade Centers, built the Empire Plaza, but created phenomenal debt for the state during the Rockefeller and the Wilson years, debt that we were still paying off. One of the reasons we had such a high income tax was to pay off the Rockefeller debt. But that is the financial story of spending. We also reduced spending, and we reduced the size of the workforce itself. And we now have the smallest workforce in modern political history in the state government, about 118,000. Smallest in over 50 years. We reached new labor agreements where we said to the labor unions we have to sit down and renegotiate, and we renegotiated a contract with what we call 3 zeros, and where the union now pays a larger percentage of their health care than they ever did before, because that is the new reality. You can't have government paying these costs without contributions from the unions. We passed pension reforms. Pension reforms are probably the largest single structural need for governments to restructure all across the country. New York is not an exception, but New York had a more aggravated case than most states. We did pension reform, fundamentally changing the pension benefit system, which will save $80 billion. And we brought down the level of state debt at the same time. Sometimes the government will cut spending, but they increase debt. We actually did both. We reduced the spending and we reduced the amount of debt that we were issuing at the same time. Because we spent less money, then you could actually tax less, and we did. Taxes today are lower for every New Yorker than they were 3 years ago. Every income tax rate has been dropped, period, all across the board. The middle class, up to $300,000, which is a very expansive middle class, definition of middle class, pays the lowest tax rate since 1953. We just cut corporate taxes in this budget from 7.1 to 6.5. Corporate taxes are now the lowest level since 1968. We just cut the manufacturer's tax to 0, literally, lowest since 1917. We're desperately trying to get the manufacturing jobs to come back because of those kinds of jobs many regions of this state need. One of the ways is reducing the taxes literally down to 0 because you can't beat 0. We reduced the estate tax threshold, the move to die tax, because some people literally, when they had to do estate planning, they would plan on moving the state from the state because our estate tax was so high. We brought our estate tax threshold in line with the federal threshold of $5.4 million. First time ever the state has had that threshold. The worst tax in the state, however, is the property tax. And no one really complains about the state income tax or the state corporate tax. You get the most complaints about the state estate tax, but really what's on people's minds is property tax. It's the tax on real estate. And that tax is out of control in this state, and it has been for a long, long time. It's also the largest single tax in the state. Property tax collects about $50 billion. The income tax in total is only about a $40 billion tax. Why is the property tax so high? Well, first, highest property taxes in the country, not just within the state. It's not just high in absolute terms. We have the highest property taxes in the United States of America. Westchester County, highest property taxes in America. And I'm a Westchester resident. Highest property taxes in America. Just think about that. Nassau's number 2, Rockland County number 4 in the country in absolute dollars. Interestingly, by percentage of home value, upstate New York has 13 of the 15 highest taxed counties. Homes in upstate New York, their value is lower, but as a percentage of the value, they're paying higher property taxes in upstate New York. When you ask people why they're moving from the state, it's the property taxes. You ask young couples why they're moving, it's the property taxes. You ask corporations why they're moving, it's the property taxes. Corporations pay more in property taxes than they pay in income tax. This is the difference for the state of New York. What we do with the property tax, I believe, determines the economic future of this state. Why is the property tax so high? Because we have too many governments. 10,500 governments in the state of New York. Think about that. Every morning you turn on 10,500 light switches, 10,500 offices, 10,500 bureaucracies, 10,500 employee plans. And the governments have just been we're creating more and more over the years. Parts of the state, the population is shrinking, the number of government employees is going up. So you have fewer and fewer people to pay for more and more government employees. Westchester County, for example, 425 local governments in Westchester County. Well, we like our local government. Yes, we like our local government. 1 county, yes, we like to live in Westchester. 6 cities, yes, we like to have cities and live in cities. 19 towns, 23 villages, 47 school districts, 28 fire districts, 16 drainage districts. Do you really need 16 drainage districts? Do you really identify life by your drainage district? Do you really know what name is on your pipes? Let's be honest. Fire protection, lighting districts, parks, refuse districts, sewer districts, 141, 54 water districts, 21 other districts, $4.4 billion in a tax levy just to run the county. That's a fundamental overhead cost before you do anything in Westchester County. Westchester County, 47,000 government employees, 1 for every 20 residents. Westchester County, 10,000 vehicles, 1 for every 4.6 employees. Just imagine the cost of operating this many levels of government day in and day out, year after year. Whatever the cost of appreciation year to year, whatever the rate of inflation, it's overburdening because there are so many governments. If they go up 1%, they go up 2%. You still can't afford it because it's multiplied over so many subdivisions. I've been working on this issue for years. As Attorney General, I changed the law to make it easier for local governments to actually consolidate and merge. And we passed that law. How many of the 10,500 local governments do you think actually consolidated when we passed the law? D, 2. Out of 10,500 over a period of like 7 years. Why? Because it's not in their interest to consolidate. And it's not in their interest to merge. Because in government, there is no discipline of profit or bottom line. And the answer in government is costs go up. There's a very simple answer. Raise taxes. Just raise the taxes. You can either consolidate or merge, or you can tighten your belt and you can streamline, or you can just raise taxes. Why go through all that aggravation? Just raise taxes. And that's what we have done very well for many, many years, to the point we are the highest property taxes in the United States of America. And that's why we have to try a different course. So, here's our new plan. We're going to use the power of democracy and the power of the vote, and we're going to use the pressure of the people. And the state's plan passed in this budget does this. In year one, homeowners will be eligible for a 2% property tax credit. You will get 2% of your property tax bill as a credit from the state, directly to your home. If, big if, your local government agrees to stay within what's called the property tax cap, which is a law we passed, which is about 2%. So year one, if your locality agrees to stay within the 2% cap, you get a 2% credit to your home. In year two, you also get a 2% credit from the state. If your local government agrees to stay within the cap, 2% growth, and provides a government efficiency plan that shows how they're going to work with local governments to save 1% a year for the following 3 years. If your local government does not do that, you do not get the check from the state. If you do not get the check from the state, you are not happy. If you are not happy, you talk to your local government officials and express to them that you are not happy. And that is democracy. And that is how the system fundamentally works. We're trying to get them to perform. I've been trying to get them to perform. I can't get them to perform. Now it's your turn to try to get them to perform. And your motivation is a 2% credit that is going to go to you. That's how this system is going to work. If the local government fails, they're going to have to answer to the homeowner. And it is that simple. And on this point, you have 425 governments in Westchester. And Westchester, in many ways, is indicative of the other counties, just worse, because it's literally the highest tax county. But everybody has an excuse. Everybody has an answer. You talk to the local governments, and you say, you know, why don't you cooperate with your neighboring government? Why does everybody have to do snow plowing? Why does everybody have to do purchasing? Why does everybody have to do employee services? Why don't you find ways just to share services, just to share back office services, just some economies of scale, all these overlapping jurisdictions, one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other, all school districts overlapping. Why don't you just find ways to cooperate and share services? They'll say, well, we literally don't even meet. We don't even convene. Say to the county executives all across the state, why haven't you brought the local governments together and said to them, guys, gals, let's figure out how to work together and save money? I know everybody likes to have their own kingdom and their own fiefdom and their own political bureaucracy. I get it, that they're little patronage mills. I get it. But we can't afford it. So we have 400 of us in one county. Let's figure out how to cooperate and work together. County executives will say, well, I don't have that power. They don't listen to me. And because this is hard, and it's controversial, and you're asking people to tighten their belt, and it's not easy, and it's not a pleasant conversation, this puts an economic incentive behind it. But this, my friends, is the last big obstacle for the state to pass. We've also been focusing on economic development. As I talked about the Regional Economic Development Council that Mr. Schleifer is the co-chair, these are working extraordinarily well. They changed the entire economic development program from the state. Rather than having people sitting in Albany and grant economic development grants, we said to regions in the state, you come together, bring the businesses, bring the academic universities, come up with a business plan for your region. What are you going to sell? What are you going to do? And we'll fund your plan. And we do it on a competitive basis. So there are 10 regions. Every year we have a competition, and only the best regions win, which actually has helped get us a better product. We're going to have the 4th round this year. There's Len, second from my left, looking very handsome and dapper, frankly. We're very aggressive on a program we call Startup New York, which is the only program like it in the country, literally. And its brilliance is its simplicity. We set up a geographic zone, 64 of them all across the state. Any new business created in that zone, no taxes for 10 years, period. No taxes for 10 years, period. The whole competitive world for us is businesses saying, well, I could go to this state for this percent, I can go to this state for this percent, I can go to Texas, I can go to South Carolina, I can go to Florida, zero tax. Oh, really? We have zones in this state that are the least expensive places in the country to locate a business. Because even a state that has a zero tax, Florida has zero income tax, they have other taxes. They have high property taxes, they have a value-added tax, they have to have some tax base. These zones, no taxes, 10 years. No income tax for the employer and the employees, no property tax, no sales tax, no tax at all. Literally the least expensive places in the country for a business to locate, and they're all across the state. They're in Westchester, they're in New York City, and they're on Long Island. We're marketing these internationally now because I believe we're going to get companies coming from international destinations to locate in New York. We have John Mack, who's serving as an unofficial ambassador for us on this program. The budget also does a lot on education. It has a 5% increase from the state, which is very generous. The formula funding we were using was the rate of personal income growth, which is about 3.85%, but we have a 5% increase for school districts because education is a priority. We funded universal pre-K all around the state. Every educational advocate will say the earlier you get young minds into an educational environment, the better. We're funding universal pre-K. We've reformed the Common Core curriculum. Common Core is a new curriculum that's being rolled out nationwide. 45 states have adopted Common Core. The Common Core curriculum is going to be on the SAT the year after next and the other standardized tests. So if a child is taking a standardized test for college, et cetera, they have to know the Common Core. So there's no reasonable option not to teach the Common Core, but the state was rolling it out too fast, in my opinion. Teachers were not ready for it. Students were not ready for it. So we passed a law that said the students will take the test, but they'll only be practice tests, and the scores won't count on their transcript. So the students aren't penalized for premature testing. We support charter schools in this budget, and we protect their growth all across the state. And we invest $2 billion in what we call a Smart Schools Initiative for technology in public schools all across the state. This budget also invests heavily in emergency management and reconstruction, lessons learned after Hurricane Sandy, Storm Lee, Storm Irene. I've been governor for 3 years, 9 federally declared disasters in 3 years. 9. My father was a governor for 12 years, had less than a handful. This extreme weather is real. It's getting worse. We're not prepared for it. We're not designed for it. We didn't build for it. It could have cataclysmic effects on this society. When people say to me, what is the one thing that keeps me up at night? It's this. It's not having the capacity to respond to an emergency. And with what we've been through, I am telling you that we have been lucky that it has not been worse, and that it hasn't been worse in terms of loss of life. And I don't want to tempt fate. We have to be ready for it from an emergency management point of view, from personnel point of view. We want to start the first college for emergency management in the United States, here in the state of New York, so we're training our personnel. We have to build homes differently. We have to build them in different places. We have to build our infrastructure differently, and now is the time to do it. We've invested heavily in infrastructure, roads and bridges. This region, you have the Tappan Zee Bridge, which is a great lesson. Tappan Zee Bridge was a lesson for me. Tappan Zee Bridge, they talk about changing for 20 years, right? Everybody grew up hearing the stories about the Tappan Zee, that the Tappan Zee was in dangerous need of repair and the Tappan Zee basically was falling down. I remember going over the Tappan Zee after hearing those stories, and Tappan Zee has those metal plates. You know how they have metal plates, and you drive over the metal plate, and the little plate moves a little bit, and you see it shake. You see a little bit of daylight on the edge of the metal plate. Oh, what if that's me? Car's going right through the hole. We need to change the Tappan Zee. And then nothing ever happened. But every year they'd say, we really have to replace the Tappan Zee. Went on for 20 years. I become governor, and one of the first meetings, we're sitting there at a big table with a whole crew of professionals and talking about the things that had to be done, And we were looking for big projects that we could do. And someone said, well, you know, there's Tappan Zee, but you can't really do it. But you can say that you're going to do it. I said, how does that work? He said, well, you know, everybody says they're going to replace the Tappan Zee and it needs a replacement. You just can't actually do it because it's big and it's the Hudson River and it's environmentally sensitive, but you could say you're going to do it. I said, see, I don't want to do it that way. I know that's how it normally happens, but I have a new way. I want to actually do what I say I'm going to do. And they were a little taken aback at this rookie governor and this novel approach. I said, and by the way, who says we can't do the Tappan Zee Bridge? Where is that written? Where in the Old Testament does it say you cannot build the new Tappan Zee Bridge? And they said, well, this is just too big and it's too complicated and we're going to get sued and Westchester doesn't agree with Rockland and Rockland doesn't agree with this one and some people want a blue bridge and some people want a red bridge and the environmentalists are going to sue. I said, look, that can't be our attitude, right? Look at us. Look at who we are. Everything we are, we built. We are people who did things they told us we couldn't do. Verrazano Bridge, George Washington Bridge, Empire State Building, World Trade Center, Freedom Tower. You tell us we can't do it. It just gets our engine running. You know, it just gets our competitive edge going. And that's all we did was build bridges and tunnels and buildings. How can we get to a point where we can't build a bridge? Of course we can. And we went out to build the Tappan Zee Bridge. And we broke ground 1 year after announcing the Tappan Zee Bridge. And it was such a powerful lesson for me. Of course you can. Of course you can. We've been doubting ourselves. We've been wallowing in a certain amount of apathy. This is the greatest state in the country. Of course we can. And we are. And it's going to be done, and we're going to be proud of it. And it's being done smart. We originally thought the bridge was going to cost $5 billion. We passed a new piece of legislation. It's called Design Build, that allows us to bid out the entire project to a private sector company. The bridge came in at $3 billion instead of $5 billion because of the way we're actually bidding it. So the bottom line for all of this is, as Bill said in the introduction, over 3 years, it is working. The government is working. We've gone from a place of scandal and dysfunction and being made a mockery of, to a place where government is working and we're doing big things and we're doing smart things and we're doing it faster than ever before. 4 years, we've done a budget for 4 years, every year on time. And as I said in the beginning, the budgets really are the snapshot of the functionality of the government. The Albany story, past 30 years, 23 budgets were late, an average of about 2 months. The gridlock you see in Washington, that was nothing. Albany had gridlock before Washington had gridlock. And we had it New York style. We had a lot of drama, a lot of intensity. And that was the way Albany worked. Now, 4 years, 4 budgets in a row, that's why we call it a grand slam. The way we got it done was we had a discussion, myself and my colleagues in the legislature, in the Senate and the Assembly, when we started 3 years ago. And we said, look, it's not working right now. It's just not working. And we have to try it a different way. And I know we have our politics, and we're Democrats and we're Republicans, but if we focus on the politics, we get nothing done. And yes, we're Democrats and we're Republicans, but we're New Yorkers first. And we're New Yorkers more importantly than we are members of any political party. And let's try this a different way. And let's leave the politics at the door, and let's work together, and let's do what's in the best interest of the people of our district. And that's what they have done. 4 budgets in a row. I take the credit because I get blamed for everything. So when I can take the credit, I take the credit. But the credit really goes to the Assembly and the Senate, and the Assembly people and the senators who put their politics aside on both sides of the aisle. What's right is right, Democrats and Republicans. And I applaud their leaders, Senator Skelos on the Senate side, Jeff Klein, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, Speaker Sheldon Silver on the Assembly side, Brian Kolb. They put their politics aside, they did the people's business, and they deserve a round of applause. And why don't you join me? Last time we had 4 budgets in a row was over 40 years ago. Nelson Rockefeller, Perry Duryea, a senator named Bridges from Niagara, who I never heard of. But basically the formula is working. Spending and taxes go down, jobs and revenue are going up. We added 444,000 new private sector jobs since 2010. We have more jobs in the state of New York than at any time in history, period. More private sector jobs than at any time in history. We are number 2 in the nation in job creation of new jobs since the recession. Exports are up 15%. Our ratings are up from all 3 rating agencies. Just last week we got positive good news after they reviewed this last budget. Unemployment is down in every region of the state, and it's down dramatically. And upstate New York, where we've been having trouble with the economy, we had the largest single drop in history in unemployment in upstate New York, 8.4 to 6.4 last year. The best is yet to come. I spent 8 years in the federal government. I've worked in every state in this nation many, many times, and I believe objectively, with a little bit of pride of residency, this state has every advantage that is imaginable. To the extent we found ourselves in a bad spot, it was our own doing. It was our own raising of taxes. It was our own lack of functionality as a government. We just had to get out of our own way, and we have gotten out of our own way. And you're going to see this state soar. It's starting now. National economy picks up just a little bit, just gives us a little bit of wind for our sails. You're going to see the Empire State reach heights it's never reached before. Thank you for having me today. Tell me what's on your mind.
We're not done yet. I think we just had a great lesson, by the way, in leadership, execution, clearly, and execution and collaboration. So at this point, Governor, you have time for questions.
Please, please. Only easy questions. We have no time for hard questions.
Hi, good morning, Governor. My name is Jeffrey Neek, and my firm is Strategies for Wealth, and I live and work here in Westchester for over 14 years. And I would say in the past there's not been a lot of cooperation with the private sector. It seems like you've made some strides in that area. Can you give us some more specifics of what you might be doing to make it more business-friendly environment?
Yeah. It's a lesson I learned when I went to Washington. I went to Washington in the Clinton administration, literally in the very beginning. I went to Housing and Urban Development, which is basically an economic development agency. I went down as the what they call assistant secretary, and then I was the secretary of Housing and Urban Development in Clinton's second term, member of his cabinet. And I'm doing economic development lending primarily to states, cities, et cetera. And almost every other state was very aggressive about partnering with the private sector. And they would come in all day long with these joint public-private sector partnerships where they were hand in glove. Governors were like heads of the Chamber of Commerce. And they had these extraordinarily cooperative relationships between government and business. And New York was on a totally different page. And there was almost a hangover New York arrogance. You know, for so long, we had so many businesses in New York, we took it for granted. And we had this attitude, which is like, well, of course business has to be here. They could never leave. No, they can leave. And we got arrogant in our dealing with business. We thought we were going to raise taxes, that we were going to raise regulations, that we were going to make it difficult for business, and they were going to stay. And it was a bad premise. And they started to leave. And it was a wake-up call. And what we're trying to do now is reverse, frankly, 50 years of bad actions vis-a-vis business. The largest signal I was trying to send right away was, I hear you, I get it, the taxes are unbearable, we're changing it, and we're changing it fast. And that's why bringing that personal income tax down for every New Yorker, middle class, lowest level in 60 years, business tax, lowest level since 1968, manufacturer's tax, lowest since 1917, estate tax, highest threshold ever, to say to business, stay with us, to say to people, stay with us, we get it, the arrows have changed. That's the largest signal we sent. And then we have a concept we call entrepreneurial government. People said you can't have that phrase. That's an oxymoron, entrepreneurial government. They said, no, you can. You can have a government that is entrepreneurial. Why does a government have to be bureaucratic and wasteful and slow? Why? Where does it say that? No, this is an entrepreneurial government. We're going to reach out. We want to be your partner. We want to get things done. We're an investment banker. We're a facilitator. Tell us what you need. We'll be there with you. Yesterday we had a big summit in Albany working with wineries, distilleries, and breweries. It's a whole industry that we're growing here in New York. Numbers have increased dramatically. We're changing laws to make it easier for them to cite wineries and breweries. We're working with tourism. So it's just a fundamentally different approach where I want to be your partner and I want to do whatever I need to do to help you grow. And that's a different stance for New York State. It's a different culture for New York State government.
Thanks, President. Morning, Governor.
Morning.
Dan Papes. Thanks for being with us here this morning. It's fantastic to have you. I have a question for you about your strategy and plan for taxes going forward. We're at the WCA, we are all about economic development, and we're very strong supporters of your Startup New York initiative. In fact, we have our own accelerator program for early stage companies where we provide them support and help them grow inside of Westchester. We've also heard you talk about several other tax initiatives, some of which you've already executed, and I think others that you plan. And I'd like to, and I think the group would like to hear about your strategy and plan for taxes and businesses going forward.
The key is you have to keep the spending discipline. If you keep spending as low as we've kept it, which is almost impossibly low, as Bill said, lowest in history, 2% spending. If you keep spending that low, good things will come, you know. It's like if you eat right and exercise, good things will come. The trick is eating right and exercise. You keep the spending down at 2%, good things will come. And you can cut taxes more because you have excess revenue, which is what we've been doing for 3 years. We've had so much excess revenue that we've actually been able to invest in good things, but primarily we've kept taxes down. I want to continue that going forward. Again, the real target is property taxes, because I am telling you, you do research, you talk to people, that's what's driving them. It is the property tax. It always was the property tax. I was reading last night FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, railing about the property tax and not the income tax. It's the property tax that drives people. And it's absurd, and it's wasteful, and it's unnecessary. And it's so unnecessary that it's frankly a little irritating. And this initiative that we have, which has been quite controversial, by the way, all the local governments are very upset with me because it thinks it puts undue pressure on them. You know why? Because I'm trying to put undue pressure on them. So sometimes it is what it is. But attack property taxes, bring down the other taxes by keeping spending low, and then our marquee program is startup, because that is the single best answer. When I'm pitching a business and I'm trying to bring a business to New York, they want to know what's the tax environment and what's the cost of doing business. And I say zero. And they say what? I said zero. Zero. You pay me nothing. No income tax, no sales tax, no property tax, you pay me nothing. It's almost incredible. That's why we use John Mack. You know, he's such an authoritarian figure in finance, because it's almost incredible that it can be zero. No state has ever done it. This state has never done it. But it's a different calculus. It's a new job. So my point is, it doesn't cost me anything. So I don't get any income tax. So it doesn't cost me anything either. And if I have a job coming in, it will generate economic benefits. They'll buy a house, they'll buy gasoline, they'll buy a car, they'll buy food. So get the jobs here and reverse that attitude of New York as the anti-business, high-tax state. Just take that reputation and flip it 180 degrees. That's what you think. I know that's what you think. I know that's what you heard, that we're a high-tax, anti-business. Zero. Put that in your calculus and play with it a little bit. So on a perception, reputation level, it does a lot of work for us. We just started it about 6 months ago. We're advertising heavily. We have thousands, literally thousands, of requests for more information. And it's going to work, because it has to work. Because now you're saying, you get the state of New York that has the best academic universities in the country, that has the most educated workforce in the country, that has the highest cultural quality in the country, and you pay no taxes. Well, I could go to this state, they have no taxes. Yeah, but what do you get in that state? Not to name the state. But doesn't compare with this state, that I can tell you, whatever state it is.
Hi, Neil Abatabalo from Pace University. You talked about some of the issues relating to Common Core and some of the things that you did to ease some of the rollout problems. What are the things are you going to do in terms of the faculty and the changes in the way they teach to get them up to speed quickly so we can get moving with this?
The short answer is the faculty will say they were not properly prepared and it was rolled out too quickly, and that's why they couldn't teach the students properly, because they themselves weren't trained properly. So the state has a major effort in training the teachers first on what's called the new Common Core curriculum. And I think the state got ahead of itself. The state education is run by something called the Board of Regents. And the Board of Regents are appointed by the legislature, and they run a department called State Education Department. The governor actually has nothing to do with the Board of Regents. I don't even have an appointment on the Board of Regents. It's a sore point of contention. But they did not do a good job of rolling out this new curriculum. I think they were hasty. They assumed that the transition would be easier than it was, and they now have to go back and provide the training to the teachers so the teachers are prepared in the classroom, which they just were not on their current schedule.
Get a young professional. Hi, Governor. My name is Olivia Ecker. I'm currently an employee at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals and the chair of the Young Professional Executive Committee for the County Association. It's very encouraging to hear you speak this morning about all of the job growth in New York and the fact that we've really been a national leader in that since the recession. But of course, we need to continue creating jobs in New York to keep young professionals here. So can you speak this morning to what New York State can continue to do to create jobs and make these investments, keeping young professionals like me living and working in New York State?
Yeah, we do it on two levels. First is remove the barriers. And that's everything we've been talking about here, bringing down taxes, changing the culture, changing the mentality, entrepreneurial government, and that's sort of across the board. Second track is totally different, and it's more of a bottom-up regional track. The New York economy. The truth is there is no New York economy. There are 10 economies within the state of New York, and Western New York is one economy, and Long Island is another economy. And the North Country, the Adirondacks, are another economy. And Westchester, Hudson Valley is another economy. So I can make changes that help everyone across the board, but if you really want to develop a regional economy, that has to come from that region. It's what we did on the federal side with Clinton. There's no top-down, one-size-fits-all economic plan. You want a plan for Westchester, Hudson Valley? You come together with the businesses in your region, academic universities in your region, government leaders in your region, and you come up with a business plan that targets your assets and builds on your assets and will locate businesses here. Find your cluster economies and your areas of growth and invest and build in those areas. And what does your region need to be competitive? And that's our regional economic development councils. And you come up with your plan. And if your plan is a smart plan, then the state will fund it to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. But they are bottom-up, regional, sustainable economic development plans. You put the two together, across the board, taxes, change, culture, and those regional plans, and that's why I think you're seeing the job growth that you're seeing. But what's fascinating for me is this state is so diverse. This is not a vanilla state, you know. It's not a one-state economy. We have such beautiful complexity and diversity in this state. Adirondacks, you know, it's a whole different place. It's a different culture. It's a different rhythm. Western New York, Buffalo's a different mentality, different set of problems. So recognizing that diversity and cultivating that diversity, I think was a key difference in our strategy. Sure.
Good morning, Governor. I'm Colleen Borelli, and I work for the Burke Rehabilitation Hospital and Medical Research Institute. And my question is about the resounding theme of property taxes. You've made cutting property taxes a clear priority, which, as you said, involves local governments cutting costs to reduce revenue needs. What would you like to see happen next, both from local governments and from private citizens as property owners?
I would like to see, look, the step we're taking, the step in this budget is a radical, transformative step. And when we talked about getting the budget passed, this was, as I said, a highly controversial step because it really is focusing on the problem for the first time. And it's putting responsibility on the local officials to do something about it. And it's empowering citizens with knowledge, which is what the 2% credit is all about to you. It now gives you knowledge. You might get a check. What do you have to do to get the check? Why didn't you get the check? And that is going to create real pressure on the local governments, which is the only way we're going to get this done. And then we just have to keep this going. My plan is keep them within what's called the property tax cap. We passed a property tax cap 2 years ago, which capped growth at 2%. Or they had to get 60% of the people to exceed the cap. Why 2% cap? Because property taxes were going up 7, 8, 9, 10% every year. I mean, it was out of control. Inflation was 2 points. Property taxes were going up 8, 9, 10%. And it was just every year. You were forcing people out of their homes. We passed a cap at 2%. we now say if they stay within that cap, you get the credit year 1. Year 2, they stay within the cap, and they come up with a plan that saves 1 point a year for 3 years. I think that is eminently reasonable. And we're not saying you have to consolidate. I live in Mount Kisco, Chappaqua, I like my town. Fine. Just what they call shared services. Just cooperate. Talk to the neighboring governments and find out what they're doing and what you can do together. I mean, it's common sense. It's what anyone would do in any real business environment, right? It doesn't happen in government because there's no force to make it happen, and it is inconvenient. So everyone does their own thing. The funny vignette. Governments are running out of salt. Why? Because there's been a lot of snow. They didn't plan. They're running out of road salt. And this is a crisis. You run out of road salt, it's a problem. Obvious problem. We have governments calling the state for, do you have road salt? We will have in one county 20, 30 governments calling, saying they need road salt. And I talk to them because I'm bored and I don't want to work on the budget. So I said, let me ask you a question. Why, the way I know more about road salt than most people now know. Road salt is really about buying in bulk because it's not the salt, it's the transportation. So when you buy more road salt, one big truck, the price comes way down. So I said to the 20, 30 governments, why didn't you just put one bid in? Why didn't you just pool your salt purchase and get it a lot cheaper rather than having 20 trucks come to deliver to your one little local government? So obvious, so simple. Why? You paid a higher price. Everybody paid a higher price. Why? There's no incentive for government to find any efficiencies or economies. And it is inconvenient at that. And you need to create a pressure to do it. And that's what this is going to be. We get property taxes under control in this state, you'll see the state take off. Because it's not our income tax, and it's not our corporate tax, and it's not our estate tax. It is the property tax. And it's unnecessary.
Well, I'm told that we have to keep the governor on track here, so this is the last question.
Morning, Governor. My name's Richard Wishney. I'm with the New York Electrical Contractors Association. Governor, we've had a number of major storms here in New York over the last several years. And I was wondering if you could tell us how the New York State budget might address how people can be protected and helped during natural disasters and other emergencies.
It works on two levels. We had tremendous damage under Hurricane Sandy, obviously. Some in Westchester, Long Island, New York City. We worked very hard, and we got a supplemental appropriation from the federal government of $60 billion, one of the largest appropriations ever. It was between us and New Jersey at that time. We cooperated. And $60 billion appropriation, we're more than 50%, so we have about $35 billion to repair the damage. That is going well. Little bureaucratic, but it's going well. The real challenge to me is learning and building back better, and learning and designing new systems and new architecture so it doesn't happen again. Our entire built environment never anticipated floods. I mean, it's just amazing. Manhattan, they talk about Manhattan and the brilliance of engineering Manhattan, how high you built, right? The skyscrapers. The real brilliance is how deep you built. Manhattan goes down 10, 15 stories in some places. There was no contemplation that there could be a flood, because you flood 15 stories underneath Manhattan, you have no way to pump the water out. Every subway opening, every stairwell down to a subway, every subway grate is now a place for water to go down. Queens Midtown Tunnel, Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, literally flooded, destroyed the tunnel. There was no anticipation that a tunnel could flood. No way to close it, no way to seal it. Whole subway system. It really is amazing to me how when we did the design, we were just blind to this. We built right up to the water line everywhere. Everybody wanted, that was the premium, right? I want to be on the water, on the water, on the water. We built into wetlands, marshlands. That's what we did. And now it's, in some ways, it's a 180-degree turn, because that water is beautiful on one day, and it can rear up and swallow your home. We're buying out communities and returning area back to Greenland. We're putting in marshes in Jamaica Bay. We're planting grasses. We're planting oyster beds, which was the original protection for Manhattan, were great oyster beds. I'll tell you what's fascinating. When you look at where the water line came up to in Manhattan after Hurricane Sandy, it came up to the exact original line of Manhattan. Exact original line, maybe 200-300 years ago. Most of Manhattan around the edge is all fill. Battery Park City's all fill. South Street Seaport is all fill. The flood came right back, covering all the fill to the original line. Mother Nature knew something. So that's the real lesson for us. How do we build? How do we build differently? Different architecture for homes, different places. And we need emergency management personnel that are better trained and better coordinated than we now have them. Our emergency management personnel were not designed to do this. They did not do hurricanes, floods in massive areas. They did homes, several home fires. They did localized disasters. They did not do region-wide mobilizations. And that's something we're working very hard to do. Because I wish I could say it won't happen again. I've been through 5 100-year floods in 3 years. So I'm a little incredulous now. Thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you for being here.